Good evening, you're watching AWANITonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. The government will introduce a targeted subsidy mechanism for RON 95 in the second half of 2024. Economy Minister Rafizi Ramli said the move will optimize Putrajaya's resources and replace the blanket subsidy to ensure aid is given to those who need it most.
Rafizi said the current model is not sustainable nor it is equitable, as the T20 income group are receiving 53% of blanket fuel subsidies. He added that since the country's fiscal deficit has been over 5% for 3 consecutive years, a targeted subsidy would better mobilize resources, reduce wastages and improve Malaysia's overall fiscal position. Currently, RON 95 is subsidized by Putrajaya and sold at RM2.05 per litre. In the tabling of Budget 2024, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim said that the subsidy for diesel would be rationalised in phases.
Malaysia will offer long-term social visit passes to international students from 23 low-risk nations that would allow them to stay in the country for up to a year after graduation. Home Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin Nasution said this is one of the 5 initiatives under Malaysia's new visa liberalisation plan beginning December 1st. Saifuddin said this would enable the students to further their studies, travel and work part-time in job sectors that are permitted according to the country's laws. Yesterday, the government announced a 30-day visa-free entry for Chinese and Indian nationals travelling to Malaysia from December 1st. Other initiatives in the plan also include a 30-day multiple entry visa to all tourists who wish to enter Malaysia and a 7-day Umrah transit visa through agencies that are registered under the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. The Home Ministry is also looking to improve the validity period of visas issued by Malaysia from the current 3 months to 6 months and to standardise the eligibility period for social visit passes to a minimum of 30 days for all countries that require visas to enter Malaysia. The government will ensure that personal data security in the digital ID will be under tight control. Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fazil said the National Digital Identity Initiative will not only protect users' data from being stolen by malicious parties, but also reduces costs for application development.
Addressing the public's concerns, Fahmi said that he had instructed the Information Department and relevant ministries to enhance clarity on the project. This includes providing module that can be used by all ministries as well as the private sector. He added that the initiative undertaken by Mimos Berhad with several other agencies was first announced in 2021 and has also been used in many countries such as Estonia, Singapore and the United Arab Emirates UAE. Last week, the Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim announced an 80 million ringgit allocation for the National ID project, with the system expected to be operational in 3 months.
The Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, with the help of social media platforms, has removed 1,147 cyberbullying contents between January and November 15th this year. Deputy Minister Teo Nee Cheng said a specific anti-cyberbullying law is also being considered to address the problem.
Saya amat setuju dengan pandangan yang berhormat bahawa bully cyber ini khasnya dalam golongan remaja, bukan satu isu yang remeh-temeh yang boleh dipandang dengan. Jadi oleh sebab itu saya menerima secara hati terbuka cadangan yang berhormat bahawa mungkin satu akta khusus boleh diwujudkan untuk bully cyber ini. Jadi saya akan membawa balik cadangan tersebut untuk berbincang dengan stakeholder yang lain, tengok mana satu kementerian yang lebih sesuai untuk membawa akta tersebut. Dan saya terima kasihlah atas cadangan daripada yang berhormat. Terima kasih.
An estimated 5.8 million households will be eligible to receive the packet cooking oil subsidy. Deputy Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Minister Fuzia Saleh says the subsidy will involve not only B40 and M40 households, but also expanded to micro traders next year.
Apabila kita kira berkenaan dengan jumlah peniaga mikro, jumlah isi rumah yang saya katakan tadi 5.8 juta yang layak, bukan keseluruhan isi rumah tangga batu ya, yang layak B40 dan sebahagian daripada M40 dianggarkan lebih kurang 5.8 juta isi rumah ya, dan peniaga-peniaga mikro juga dianggarkan lebih kurang 91,860 ya, yang mereka menggunakan lebih kurang 400 kilo sebulan. Ini yang kita panggil mobile food cart, yang jual dekat gerai, yang jual dekat warung ni ya, jual goreng pisang dan sebagainya.
She said that current bulk subsidy system inherited from the previous administration stops at the retailer level and needs to be expanded to reach to the consumer level. She added that the proposed cash transfer to consumers for the purchase of packet cooking oil may be the best solution, but the implementation mechanism requires further research. The ringgit is likely to strengthen against the US dollar in 2024, particularly in the second half of the year towards the 4 ringgit 40 cent level, said the Malaysian Institute of Economic Research. Its board member, Tan Sri Dr. Sulaiman Mahbub, says one of the factors driving the ringgit to strengthen against the greenback is the increase of the sales and service tax rate to 8%. This is because it would generate extra revenue for the government and improve fiscal position. He noted that the ringgit has been declining in 2023, prompted by weaker external demand, slower economic growth in China, as well as the US Federal Reserve interest rate hikes. MIER also forecasts Malaysia's economic growth to be in the range of 4.3% to 4.6% in 2024. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim's approval rating took a hit, dropping from 68 to 50% 1 year after he assumed office. Ibrahim Sufyan from the Merdeka Centre explains how this drop in popularity compares with previous surveys on former administrations.
We've been doing this service for 20 years now. What we notice is that there is a very regular pattern, which is when a new administration is formed, there is a typically accompanying high expectation on the part of the public that this new leadership, new administration will be able to fix some of the long-standing issues. But within 3 to 6 months, typically, the administration will find itself mired, on all kinds of problems, political opposition friction, and then the public will begin to be jaded and be unhappy that the changes are not forthcoming very soon. So it's quite typical. I think for the current administration, the decline from 68 to 50 is not terrible. It's not bad because 50% of the people are still feeling that the Prime Minister is doing a good job.
Ibrahim outlined what the government should focus on as it enters its second year.
This pandemic had a very deep ramifications in our society. People lost incomes, depleted their savings, so people are now beginning to rebuild. But at the same time, we are part of the global economy, and it takes time for Malaysia to, regain investments and its strength and is dependent on the strengths of its trading partners. I think the government has already taken steps. From what we see, the government has done. They are already taken cognizance of the issues. The government has already unveiled its Madani economic framework. I think it outlines the government's thinking, and I think it's right that they want to raise incomes. They also want to raise social safety nets. So I think that's a step in the right direction. So I think the thinking and the planning is headed in the right direction. I think what's needed right now for the government is to begin articulating the kind of fiscal reforms to basically focus on the economy, but talk about the hard, bitter pills that we have to swallow as a society, but at the same time, speak of the benefits and how the government is going to mitigate its impact on lower income households. So if they're going to rationalize subsidies or reintroduce certain taxes, they also need to talk about how affected households in the lower income, the middle income groups will be helped by the government.
We will go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more.
Dua beradik dibesarkan oleh keluarga angkat penuh konflik.
Ni kau mahal ni. Tempat aku belajar tu banyak anak orang kaya.
Macam ni ke anak yang enti besarkan selama ni?
Sekarang ni masa kita balas jasa nanti dulu.
mencari jawapan kepada tragedi lalu.
Satu hari, saya akan jadi senator.
Angan-angan boleh, tapi kena...
Sebabkan dia ni, mak kita tak bersalah tu mati. Aku janji, kita akan dapat keadilan untuk mak.
Jangan lupa janji di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Terokai keindahan pulau, tarikan pelancongan dan kehidupan penduduk setempat dalam island checkpoints yang dibawakan khas oleh Tourism Malaysia.
Ada kick dia. Jom kita pergi tengok. Dia main turun je, tak cilah kan? Macam-macam lagi lah. Bau dia.
Ni bubur kunyit, boyak garam.
Experience yang baru, kami. Memang cantik.
Setiap Sabtu, 8.30 malam di semua platform Astro AWANI.
Welcome back. The truce between Israel and Hamas has entered its final 24 hours. More Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners are due to be released today. Hamas says it is seeking to extend the current 4-day pause in fighting with Israel and increase the number of hostages released. Israel is facing enormous pressure from the families of hostages as well as allies to extend the truce to secure more releases. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday he had spoken to US President Joe Biden and would welcome extending the temporary truce if it meant that on every additional day, 10 captives would be freed. The pause that began on Friday has seen dozens of hostages freed, with more than 100 Palestinian prisoners released by Israel in return. In other news, New Zealand's new government says it plans to scrap the nation's world-leading smoking ban to fund tax cuts. The legislation introduced under the previous Jacinda Ardern-led government would have banned cigarette sales next year to anyone born after 2008. The move was criticized by health experts and anti-smoking group as a step back for the country. Christopher Luxon confirmed the matter after being sworn in as Prime Minister on Monday. He said the tax revenue from ongoing cigarette sales would generate income for the government, but also expressed concern that the smoking ban would create a thriving and untaxed black market. The legislation passed last year was designed to reduce the number of people using tobacco products almost immediately. While the number of adults smoking in New Zealand is relatively low at just 8%, the previous government had envisioned a future where the country was completely smoke-free. A Beijing court today began hearing compensation cases filed by relatives of passengers on flight MH370, nearly 10 years after the aircraft went missing. More than 40 families filed lawsuits against Malaysia Airlines, the aircraft manufacturer Boeing, engine maker Rolls-Royce, and German insurer Alliance Insurance.
The lawsuits seek compensation, a formal apology, and the creation of a fund to continue the search for the plane. It was unclear what jurisdiction the Chinese court has to enforce the claims against the defendants. Similar cases were brought in the United States by the victims' families have been dismissed in January 2020 on the premise that the case belonged in Malaysia. Lawsuits also have been filed in Malaysia. In one of the latest cases, the Malaysian government agreed in 2021 to a compensation payout of $320,000 to family members of 2 victims. In China, families who signed a settlement agreement with Malaysia Airlines received $350,000 in compensation. Only a few dozen Chinese families signed initially, but over the years, more have opted to settle. Flight MH370 carrying 239 people vanished on March 8, 2014 en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Chinese nationals made up the largest group of passengers at 153. Although a few fragments reportedly from the jet have been found on Western Indian Ocean shores, search efforts for MH370 officially ended in 2018.
After many delays and setbacks, rescuers resorted to manual tools and digging by hand to reach the 41 construction workers trapped in a tunnel in the Indian Himalayas. The workers have been stuck in the 4.5-kilometer tunnel in northern Uttarakhand state since it collapsed on November 12th. In a separate effort, Indian rescuers began drilling vertically on Sunday from the top of a mountain that is estimated to take about 100 hours. Rescuers had hoped to finish the drilling late Thursday, but had to suspend the operation after the platform on which the machine was placed was damaged. Rescue efforts have been slow, complicated by falling debris and repeated breakdowns of drilling machines. Authorities have said they are safe with access to light, oxygen, food, water and medicines. That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Today we're diving into a critical aspect of climate action, reducing methane emissions. Now we'll explore the efforts, the challenges and the collective strategies needed to pave the way for a reduction in methane emissions. So joining me on the show today is Dr. Shireen Yawanaraja. She is Director of Global Energy Transition at the Environmental Defence Fund, which is a global non-profit driving scientific efforts to focus the world's attention on the importance of reducing methane emissions. So Shireen, if I may call you that.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the show with me today to talk about methane. For the many of us who may have heard of it before but aren't familiar with the impact of methane emissions, maybe you can begin by telling us, just how potent methane is, how it affects the climate, and also the role it plays in the climate crisis.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for having me. For the longest time, methane was not part of the climate conversation. Usually when people think about climate change, they think about carbon dioxide. But there are other gases that contribute to global warming, and methane is one of them. Methane is a greenhouse gas, and it is the primary component of natural gas. And at least 25% of the global warming that we experience today is caused by methane. Wow. And it is the oil and gas sector that is one of the leading contributors of methane emissions. Now, in the first 20 years after methane is released into the atmosphere, it traps 80 times more heat than carbon dioxide.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So why hasn't it been part of the climate conversation? Why is it that we're focused on CO2 emissions?
Well, that's a really good question, and the organization that I work for, Environmental Defence Fund, we have actually worked very hard over the past decade to focus the world's attention on the importance of methane. Okay. Not just as a cause for global warming, but also as a solution to reduce global warming. Because carbon dioxide determines how high temperatures will get in terms of global warming, but it is methane that determines how fast that the globe will warm up in the near term. So reducing methane emissions starting now and quickly is actually the best way to limit global warming and also to prevent associated impacts.
Okay. You mentioned the oil and gas sector being one of the primary sources of methane emissions.
Yep.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Explain where it comes from and maybe what the key areas are when where methane emissions originate, and I guess which areas represent the most opportunity for action.
Yeah. So methane emissions typically come from the upstream sector of the oil and gas industry, and by upstream I mean drilling wells and transportation of natural gas and oil for that matter, storage tanks, flares, and certain equipments. I guess the main sources of methane emissions would be flares, vents, and fugitive emissions, leaks, for example. So
these are parts of the
infrastructure. Yes.
The infrastructure. Okay. So the world recognizes that there's a significant opportunity here to address methane emissions in the fight against climate change. So at COP 2001, that was COP